Thank you, and it's absolutely great to be back in Southport. The first event I did here was 1988 when Tony Benn was running for the leadership of the Labour Party. Eric Heffer and Tony and myself were here doing stuff then. I don't suppose anybody in this room was present at that time, but it's okay, I'll forgive you. Could I just say thank you so much for inviting me. Absolute real pleasure to be here, and well done all of you on the campaigning you're already doing, the message you're putting forward, and to Sean, everything you're doing that inspires so much in people with your dedication, your humanity and your honesty. And also personally, a big thank you to you for coming to North Islington. I know you're not a great lover of London, but you know, we'll keep that as a kind of private message between ourselves. But you came and worked incredibly hard, door knocking, to ensure that we managed to win in Islington North on July the 4th. And it was an incredible campaign, brought about by people just turning up from everywhere because they wanted to show that we were not going to allow lies and money to defeat what our message was, which is about social justice, equality and peace, and a society based on social justice and peace, not based on greed, racism and the nastiness that the right offer to us. We put that message across and we won the election emphatically. Thank you, Sean, and everyone else. Thank you. And what I would also say is that Southport has been through some horrendous times with the murders that took place. Nobody can be anything but deeply moved by the horror of what happened on that day. And one can also not be anything but deeply appalled by the way in which far-right racists responded to that, not just here, but all around the country. And the response that was given by decent, ordinary people in Southport of going straight to the mosque to help them clean up, to help them clear up after the damage that had been done, and build that sense of loyalty and solidarity with the community. So this morning, Sean and I went to the mosque to talk to the people that were there on the first day of Ramadan, and I presented them with a box of Palestinian dates to share out later on for the iftar supper from us, to show that the Muslim community is absolutely part of our community. And we're not going to allow that. We're not going to allow them to be isolated in the way that the far right want us to do. So it is about giving that message of what we want from our community. And I think you've heard from Sean this afternoon what he wants to achieve here and what we want to achieve in a wider place all over the country. After the 2019 election, and by the way, for those of you that study electoral history, I don't want to go on about this too long, but I do think occasionally a few facts are important. The highest ever Labour vote achieved in this century was in 2017. The 2019 result, which we didn't win, I well know that. I was there. I was absolutely there. I know every last part of it. We still achieved a far higher vote than most of the other election results of this century. Don't run away with the idea that putting forward policies about redistribution of wealth, redistribution of power, giving young people hope, not abuse, protecting our environment, not destroying it, looking for peace rather than war, doesn't have a massive resonance out there. But you've got to go out and tell them about it. That's why we're forming these independent groups all over the country, to go out and tell that message out there, all over. And I'm very determined that we achieve that. And what we did after the 2019 election, during COVID, we thought about it quite a lot, was to form the Peace and Justice Project. Len McCluskey is there at the back. Welcome, Len McCluskey! Carrie Murphy is also here, who has many scars on her back, mainly from managing my office during the leadership of the Labour Party. And Carrie, thanks for everything you do, and thanks for being here today. And likewise, Martin Giles, one of the organisers of the Peace and Justice Project. We've got probably somewhere around 60,000 people following the Peace and Justice Project. It's a complicated thing in a way, but in a way it's very simple. It's what the message says. It is about empowering people. So we do run concerts, music for the many, to give young people somewhere to perform their music. We also have done a lot of work with the Bakers Union, with United Hospitality, and Uber Eats workers and Deliveroo riders and many others, particularly those in Starbucks and Amazon and others who are fighting for trade union rights, because they are the discriminated workers of the 21st century in the way that the building workers and dock workers were the discriminated workers of the 20th century. So we're doing all of those things. But we also believe that socialism and social justice doesn't just come from the economic arguments, important as they are. It comes from international solidarity, but it also comes from inspiration. Hence, we produced this wonderful book, Poetry for the Many, and Len and I have done many events all over the country, and amazing numbers of people turn up who are inspired and brought together by the imagination that poetry brings to us. And so, socialism and social justice is about lots of things. It is bread, but with roses too, and I think it's important to get that message across. And when we're talking of international solidarity, I was in Parliament on Monday when Keir Starmer came with his statement, which apparently he'd forgotten to tell the Foreign Office that their overseas aid budget was going to be cut by 2/3. I think if somehow or other he just missed telling them that until they arrived there. Apparently it was the first they'd heard about it, which was a little odd, should we say. And I challenged the whole notion of what he was proposing. Now, don't get me wrong, the war in Ukraine is abominable and appalling, and I don't support what Russia has done. But I want peace. I don't want conscripted soldiers from Ukraine killing conscripted soldiers from Russia. A mother losing a son is Ukrainian, is Russian, is anything else. It is about bringing about an end to that conflict and bringing about peace. And it is also about how we approach these things. So by raising defence expenditure by 13 billion a year, which Andrew has very correctly explained to you, what does that do? That's 13 billion pounds not spent on health, on education, on housing, on environment. It is 13 billion not spent on trying to deal with the issues of abominable levels of poverty and dislocation in war-torn countries around the world. Instead, it is more money into the arms industry. And the war in Palestine is the most appalling thing possible. And having been on every single one of the Palestine solidarity marches, I just want you to understand this. I'm sure many of you have been on them. These are not the marches of hate that the Tories talk about or anybody else talks about. These are the marches of love and solidarity, with a very large number of Jewish people joining, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist and everything else, saying we want an end to the war, we want justice for the Palestinian people. And to give you an example of this, I've just received a message, just literally a few moments ago, from my friend Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who is a Palestinian doctor who lives in Ramallah and is the leader of the Palestine National Initiative. He's not in Fatah, he's not in Hamas, it's the Palestine National Initiative. And he gives me this thing. The Israeli army and intelligence services are attacking the Palestinian Tulkarem refugee camp and the city of Tulkarem on the 34th day. They're also attacking Nur Sham's refugee camp on the 21st day. The Israeli army caused severe systematic destruction in infrastructure of the city in both camps. And the army killed 13 civilians during the attack and has already displaced 16,000 civilians from their homes in both camps and the surrounding neighbourhoods. The army is now burning and destroying many homes as I write this message to you. Where are the weapons coming from that are doing that bombardment? Where are the planes coming from that are undertaking the surveillance over Gaza? Our supplying of weapons to Israel has been part of the bombardment of Gaza has resulted in a contribution to the killing of over 60,000 people in Gaza. There has to be peace. There has to be a recognition that international law and the Hague Convention, which is a coming together of a group of countries to ensure that there is adherence to international law, is supported and adhered to. The Palestinian people have suffered too much for too long and lost too many. And I think the solidarity of people in this room and all over this country shows that we want our government to obey international law and stop the supplying of weapons to Israel. Now, it's how we take things forward from here that is so important, because I, having been on all these marches and demonstrations and on the picket lines with the rail workers, with the teachers, with the posties and so many others, there's a whole thirst and a generation of people in our society that are fed up with a country that has such huge degrees of inequality and poverty, that has food banks in every town and city in the whole country, and has an economic and budget process that has increased that level of inequality even since the last general election. And when the opportunity was put there in front of Parliament and the government to take one small step to eliminate some of the disgraceful child poverty in our country, to eliminate the two-child benefit cap, they refused to do that. They refused to compensate the WASPy women whose money was so disgracefully taken from them. They refused to increase the level of disability benefits that are so abysmally low that more than a third of the families with any member of the family who has any disability are living in poverty. They didn't do what they should have done about ending rough sleeping homelessness within our society. And yes, building more houses, I agree, but let's build council houses for social rent to give people security of housing to live in. And so it is about pursuing an economic strategy which is about redistribution of wealth and power within our society. And that means we've got to be able to come together to achieve these things. That's why we formed the project. That's why Andrew, myself, and many, many others are going all around the country, meeting with and talking with independent groups like yourselves. So we build together that alliance of all of us that are moving in the same direction. The demands we're making, decent wages, environmental sustainability, a fully funded, publicly owned national health service and a national care service so that we get care for all those that need it. I fully recognise that all these things are complicated, and I fully recognise all these things do cost money. But you have to look at it this way. If we don't, for example, establish a national care service on the same principles of the National Health Service that gives care for those that need it, what happens? Somebody else has to pay for it. How's it paid for? If you've got a house, it comes from selling that house to pay for it. Or if you don't have any great resources of your own, and many people, then usually women, give up jobs, give up lives, give up careers to care for people that ought to be cared for publicly by a national care service. Why can't we make the ideal of a national care service the same cause célèbre that the Labour government of 1945 made in the establishment of the National Health Service, so we give people that security? I meet too many families, middle-aged couples, going through the debt levels of extraordinary horror to sustain children in university and older parents and relatives in care homes. And so they're going into debt in order to pay for services that ought to be publicly available. So why is it in this country we allow this degree of inequality to continue, and we continue to pursue the idea that somehow or other growth and inequality are fine, providing somebody is doing well out of it? Well, let's inspire people instead into the kind of decent, equal world we could achieve. That's what we tried to put, and did put, into the 2017 and 2019 manifestos. That start down a road to at least develop that sense of a properly functioning welfare state and public ownership of the public services that have done very well out of our investments. Royal Mail, for example, the railway companies, and not allowing open access operators to run on our lines instead, have it all publicly run and publicly owned, and crucially, I believe, in the water industry. The water industry, privatised under Margaret Thatcher, assets stripped by those that bought it, prices going up all over the place, the highest ever levels of pollution of our streams, our rivers and our sea, and an appalling amount of waste because they haven't invested enough in maintaining those pipes. I think the private sector have adequately proved over the last 30 years they're incapable of delivering a water supply to all of us. Bring it back into public ownership. So that's why we have to be organised together. That's why we need that unity of groups like ourselves all over the country coming together to be a coherent force in the elections that are coming up immediately, but they're very soon. These are the May County Council elections, but particularly the 26 elections, which are in the metropolitan areas, as well as the London boroughs, as well as Scotland and Wales. These are huge electoral opportunities to put forward a radical alternative ahead of a general election in, 28 or 29. And so it is not about what we do then, it's what we do now, about mobilising and empowering people. And let's finish with this. If you get together as a community and you are defending a hospital against closure, or you want a piece of wasteland turned into a park, or you see an empty building that would make a wonderful nursery for children to enjoy and develop from. You get together, you campaign, you don't always win. No, you don't always win. But you get together and you campaign, and you achieve something. You're suddenly emboldened and strengthened as a community, and you don't get pushed around anymore by planning decisions and other things that are taken against your interest, because it's about community empowerment. I always wanted the Labour Party to become a community-based organisation with community organisers organising at the community level, so that that community pressure is, yes, a pressure on elected politicians as well. There should be. That's what accountability looks like, and that's what we're about. Building a community force in the unions, in the communities, that will bring about that social justice and that social change. You're doing it here in Southport. We're doing it in North Islington. Andrew's doing it in Camden, and it's happening in Newcastle, it's happening in Liverpool, it's happening all over the country. These are exciting times. Let's work together, united together, with that vision of a better world, a peaceful world, and a more just world. And you know what? It's all possible. Thank you very much.